Live Free or Die Hard was directed by Len Wiseman and starred Bruce Willis once again as John McClane and Justin Long as a hacker who gets in trouble with some cyber terrorists led by Timothy Olyphant. This was the first film in the Die Hard series to explore the concept of electronic warfare and what that could mean if the terrorist with the right expertise engaged in it. And it was also the first Die Hard to receive the PG-13 rating, which obviously sent people into an uproar. How is he going to say his famous catchphrase if you can't even say it in a PG-13 movie? So obviously there was a lot of problems that came from the marketing of the film, because although it could gain a wider audience and more kids could go see the movie, longtime fans were disappointed before they even saw the movie, because the McClane character is so rooted in the things that we usually see in a rated R movie. And it's funny because in retrospect, the PG-13 theatrical version of this movie maintained the John McClane character a lot better than Die Hard 5, its R-rated sequel.
That's gonna wake the neighbors.
But I want to make it really clear that I'm reviewing the unrated version, which is far superior to the PG-13 theatrical. This movie has blood when there's gunfire, there's a lot more F-words, and of course his signature catchphrase is kept intact.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker!
The unrated version is the only version I watch anymore because it feels like a Die Hard movie. It has the F-words, it's got the blood, it has his catchphrase, it feels right. The main complaint that most fans had before they saw the movie doesn't apply to the unrated version. Every time I sit down to watch this movie, I always think to myself, is this when I'm supposed to start not liking it? Because a lot of Die Hard fans don't like this movie, and I always feel like I'm weird because I like it. The film gained a reputation for that PG-13 rating that it never really escaped, and it's harder to find the unrated version, and so most people watch the PG-13 and it feels very watered down and it feels kind of safe, whereas the unrated version feels really intense. And honestly, even when I saw the theatrical version, I remember thinking, this action is fucking awesome. Len Wiseman did a fantastic job directing the action. The action feels larger than life and in your face. The camera work has a lot of movement to it. They do a lot of old-fashioned stunts. Even though they of course utilize CGI in certain sequences, they have a lot of really great stuntmen and women doing some incredible things in this movie. And this feels very much like the version of McClane that I wanted to see in 2007, which was an analog hero in a digital world. That's one of the biggest themes of this movie, is how John McClane is able to deal with the changing world around him. He's up against cyber terrorists. They're using computers, something he does not understand. So he's got his new pal, played by Justin Long, to help him out. I think it was a really smart way to take McClane into the new millennium, because up until Die Hard 4, I think most people just assumed it was a trilogy and it was over. McTiernan had the last say, and that's it. And while I would have been happy with that, I still have a lot of fun when I watch Die Hard 4. I think it's a lot better than people give it credit for. And the back and forth between him and Justin Long is surprisingly good. I like Justin Long a lot in this movie, actually. I remember back when I watched featurettes for it when it came out in interviews, he had stated that he was so afraid of becoming that sidekick that everyone hates in a Die Hard movie, and he just wanted to be helpful. He wanted to be a character that was proactive. And I honestly think they did a really good job with this. It could have been very annoying, and there are times where you're like, the randomly developing romance between Farrell and Lucy, McClane's daughter, feels unnecessary. But there are still some scenes where McClane is able to use his knowledge as a police officer to upend the terrorists' plans, like when he says a certain code over the radio that ends up being naked people. Scenes like that are why McClane really works for me in this movie. They didn't use his age in the same way that they used Harrison Ford's age just a year later in Indy 4. In this film, they used his age not as the butt of a joke, but they used it as a way to show how a person might be in a scenario where he used to be on top of things and now he has no idea what's going on. He always feels like he's running to catch up with everyone around him. And just like in the other films, this movie remembers that McClane is first and foremost a police officer. He cares about people, he wants to help people, he wants to make sure that people feel safe. One of my favorite action scenes in this movie starts with this car crash during this traffic jam, eventually moving into a tunnel where all the lights are turned off, leading to a lot of great stunts, and an awesomely over-the-top moment where McClane drives a car into a fucking helicopter. What these films try to depict with McClane is that he's always the wrong guy in the wrong place at the wrong time. Die Hard 2 had a scene where somebody literally says that to his face. This film has a scene that feels like they're saying the same thing, but it's said in a way that feels more impactful for the character. The idea being that it's not just that McClane finds himself always thrown into these weird scenarios, but but it's just that no one else is willing to do what he's willing to do. And so it's not just the random chance element. It's the fact that he also steps up. I also want to talk about Maggie Q. She is fucking badass in this movie. She has one of my favorite action scenes. This fight with McClane that ends in an elevator shaft. This entire sequence is white-knuckled. I really do have to say that the action in this movie is very underrated. It's not talked about as much as it should. I think Len Wiseman did a fantastic job directing these set pieces. Let's talk a little bit about Timothy Olyphant. I like him a lot as an actor. I think he's fantastic, but his character here is pretty basic. He's basically just stern man who tells people to press things into the keyboard. His character is pretty weak, but he's enjoyable in the movie. I like him more than Colonel Stewart in Die Hard 2, but as a villain, there's not much to him. But at the very least, he does get to interact with McClane a lot more than Die Hard 2's villain did. This film also starred Kevin Smith as the Warlock, one of the most notorious hackers in history. I'm a fan of his. I like a lot of his films, and I like hearing him talk about movies. It kind of feels like one of us got to make movies for real, you know what I mean? But his character in this movie is basically an exposition factory. They try to give him some comedy. He's in a basement. He loves Star Wars. What a stretch! I know. But this whole portion of the movie really drags down the pacing. And there's also a lot of scenes with police officers. They serve as a reminder that there's other people involved with the search for Gabriel as he's trying to siphon away the world's funds for himself. But the film picks back up again really fast when McClane and Farrell have to infiltrate this facility. There's a stuntman in this film that does some really incredible things that leads to one of the series' better hand-to-hand combat scenes. I also love all of McClane's reactions whenever he kills a bad guy. Now, the sequence in the movie that does start to stretch believability a bit is this moment where McClane is in this semi-truck and an F-35 is blowing up the bridge and he has to like drive up it, and I'm just not buying that happening. A lot of people complain about him landing on the F-35 and that seems stupid, but I actually love that moment. I think it's a beautiful cocktail of sound effects, pyrotechnics, and stunt work. But when he's driving the semi through the bridges and they're all collapsing behind him, it just looks like a Michael Bay movie all of a sudden. And similar to Die Hard 3, the weakest element of the action in this movie is probably this finale. They all kind of just end up in a warehouse and a couple people get shot. It doesn't really feel like it built to much of anything, although the use of his catchphrase and literally shooting through his bullet wound to kill the bad guy behind him is actually kind of fucking badass. I still really enjoy Die Hard for it. Granted, I don't watch the theatrical anymore, and if I did, I'd probably be a lot more annoyed with this movie than most people. Just stick with the unrated and you'll have a blast. I'm gonna give Live Free or Die Hard a B. I think this movie's a lot better than people give it credit for, and honestly, it's a fucking goddamn masterpiece compared to the next one, which gratefully I've reviewed already and don't have to talk about. Guys, thank you so much for watching these Die Hard reviews. It was really fun to fill in these gaps, and hopefully in the future we can talk about some more classic films that I've always wanted to talk about. I have some more ideas for some things. I've never reviewed Predator 2 or Predators. That should be fun. I'd like to do those next. Guys, thank you so much as always for watching, and if you like this, you can click right here and get Stuckmanized.